Christmas at Creepy Lake. When love turns bitter in a season meant for joy, beware what may rise to celebrate its ruin. Hidden away in a forgotten stretch of forest, far from any main road, lies a lake named Creedy Lake, named after the couple who once lived on its shore. By day, it's a place of quiet beauty. Sunlight filters through the towering pines, casting dappled shadows on the water's glassy surface. Wild grasses sway at the shoreline, and the air is thick with the scent of pine and earth, untouched and serene. But locals rarely visit anymore, especially after dark, and now most refer to it as Creepy Lake. Fred and Franny Creedy had built their cabin by the lake many years ago, when they were still young and full of dreams for a quiet, simple life close to nature. When they first constructed it, their love had been like the beams and planks, strong, warm, and enduring. Their days were spent in harmony with nature, and their evenings in each other's arms, dancing across the cabin floor to their favorite tunes. But as the decades passed, something changed. Their once strong bond began to fray, worn down by the small grievances and quiet resentments that had crept into their lives. The dances grew rare, replaced by long silences and bitter words. Slowly, the warmth that had once filled the cabin faded, replaced by a cold hostility that neither could shake. The once quiet home became filled with bickering, resentment simmering under the surface. One bitter night, just days before Christmas, the tension reached its breaking point. Franny, her hands trembling with a mixture of rage and despair, crept up behind Fred as he dozed in his armchair, the firelight flickering across his lined face. She gripped a cast-iron frying pan, heavy and cold as her heart, and swung it hard. The blow was not enough. Fred stirred, a groan escaping his lips, and with a snarl of determination, Franny wrapped a string of Christmas lights around his neck. She pulled tighter and tighter until his struggles ceased. The cabin seemed impossibly quiet as she wrapped Fred's lifeless body in the lights, winding them around him like garland. She dragged him out to the old rowboat, its wood creaking under his weight, and rowed to the lake's center. The water swallowed Fred without a sound, and Franny rowed back to shore, feeling the cold bite of winter in the darkness. That should have been the end of the tale. Whether Franny regretted her actions, no one knows. But on the night of Christmas Eve, strange lights began to glow beneath the lake's surface, pale, shimmering, and eerily festive. The lights moved slowly toward the shore, growing brighter. Then, emerging from the frigid depths, came Fred. His waterlogged form staggered onto the snowy bank, Christmas lights still wrapped around him, faintly glowing like an ominous holiday beacon. His eyes, sunken and hollow, stared ahead as he trudged through the snow toward the cabin. The front door creaked open as Fred pushed inside, dripping lake water onto the old wooden floors. His voice rasped through the silence, calling up the stairs. "Where is my wife? It's Christmas time, and I want to dance." In her bedroom, Franny awoke with a start. The voice was unmistakable. She squeezed her eyes shut, praying it was just a dream. "Come to me, Franny," Fred's voice boomed, even closer now. She could hear his heavy footsteps on the stairs. "Come to me, my love." Franny lay frozen with fear, trembling beneath the covers. Her heart pounded as a heavy knock sounded on her bedroom door. "Are you in there, my love?" Fred's voice called, mimicking the warmth he once had, yet laced with something cold and terrifying. With a crash, the bedroom door burst open, and there stood Fred, his pale, bloated skin stretched tight over sunken features, dripping with murky lake water. A string of lights hung around him, tangled and twisted like a serpent, flickering dimly against his decayed flesh. "It's time to die, and then we dance for eternity," he screamed, his lips pulled back into a ghastly, unnatural smile. Franny tried to scream, but the sound was choked off as the Christmas lights tightened around her throat, digging into her skin. Fred's icy hands held her firmly, his grip unyielding as he dragged her from the bedroom, down the creaking stairs, and out into the biting night air. Snow crunched beneath her feet as he pulled her across the frozen ground toward the lake, its dark surface looming ahead. Without hesitation, he plunged her into the icy water. The cold closed over her, filling her lungs and dragging her down into the silent, suffocating darkness. Now, the cabin stands abandoned, its roof sagging and windows shattered, overtaken by time and neglect. Legend has it that on some bitter winter nights, the faint sound of Christmas music drifts from the ruins, and if one dares to look out onto the frozen lake, they may catch a glimpse of ghostly lights shimmering beneath the ice, swaying slowly as Fred and Franny dance their eternal waltz in the dark, icy waters below. Shadow's last fetch. The truest love is not measured in time spent, but in the devotion that remains. On the edge of a small town, in a small house nestled between a dense forest and a wide open field, lived a boy named Davy and his loyal dog called Shadow. The dog was Davy's constant companion, a warm presence with a thick, shiny coat and a wagging tail that could knock over a lamp. Every day they wandered into the woods, or they'd tumble around the field, laughing, barking, and losing track of time. The field was their favorite playground, full of hidden dips and gentle slopes that made every game feel like an adventure. Davy would throw sticks, toys, or best of all, Shadow's beloved red ball. Shadow adored that ball. He'd pounce on it, nose it, and bring it back every time, his eyes bright with excitement. With Shadow by his side, every step felt like part of an unbreakable adventure, one Davy thought would last forever. Seasons came and went, and eventually Davy grew taller, his voice deepened, and his life grew busier. By the time he was a teenager, homework, friends, and other distractions pulled him further away from his adventures in the field. Shadow aged too, his face peppered with grey, his pace slower. They still went out sometimes, walking side by side through the woods, Shadow's head low and Davy's mind often elsewhere. Davy felt guilty sometimes, knowing that he didn't play with Shadow as much as he used to. But Shadow seemed content, happy just to be near him. Then, one cold autumn morning, Davy found that Shadow had quietly passed away in his sleep. The house suddenly felt painfully empty. Davy dug a grave near the edge of the field where they used to play, and gently laid Shadow to rest there. His heart felt like it might break as he whispered goodbye, tears tracing silent paths down his cheeks. I wish I could have played with you one last time," he murmured, feeling the weight of every game they hadn't played, every walk they hadn't taken. Back home, he found Shadow's bed and red ball lying in the corner of his room. The sight of it made his heart ache, so he picked them up, placed them in the back of his closet, and shut the door. With time, the pain dulled a little, but the memories of their days together never faded. A year went by, and the anniversary of Shadow's death slipped past, unremarked and quiet. But that night, a strange sound pulled Davy from his sleep, a faint whining that seemed to drift through the dark. He rubbed his eyes, sitting up, uncertain if he was dreaming, Then came another sound, a faint, familiar scratching at his bedroom door. Davy's heart pounded as he stared at the door, caught between fear and curiosity. The scratching continued, gentle yet persistent, and he couldn't ignore it. Slowly, he slid out of bed, shivering as he approached the door. He turned the handle and pulled it open. There, in the shadowy hallway, sat Shadow. But he wasn't the same happy dog Davy remembered. Shadow's coat was patchy and rotting, his eyes covered with a dull, milky film, and his once wagging tail hung limp. The smell of damp earth and decay filled the air. Davy staggered back, instinctively recoiling in fear. But then, as if recognizing him, Shadow let out a small, hopeful whine and wagged his tail just once. As Davy took a shaky breath, trying to steady himself, Shadow hobbled over to the closet, pressing his nose against the door and scratching softly. Davy's hands trembled as he pulled the door open, and Shadow's old red ball rolled out, still as bright and intact as the last time he'd seen it. Shadow gently gripped the ball in his teeth, then turned and padded toward the hallway, pausing to look back at Davy, waiting for him to follow. Though a twinge of fear lingered, Davy found himself following Shadow down the hallway and out the front door, stepping into the cool night air. Shadow led him across the yard and to the field, which stretched out before them under the soft glow of the moon. Davy watched as Shadow dropped the red ball at his feet, backing up eagerly, his tail wagging just like old times. Davy hesitated, his mind spinning, but his heart took over. He picked up the ball and threw it. Shadow bolted after it, his legs pumping and his eyes locked on the ball like he was young again. They spent the rest of the night in the field, playing fetch, laughing and chasing each other under the starry sky, just like they used to. With each toss, Shadow seemed to grow younger, his coat filling out, his eyes brightening, until he looked just like the young, vibrant dog Davy remembered. The night slipped by too quickly, and as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Shadow slowed down, returning to Davy's side. He nudged Davy's hand one last time, and Davy dropped to his knees, hugging him tightly, tears streaming down his face. As the sun rose, Shadow began to fade, his solid form blurring, until he was nothing more than mist in Davy's arms, and then he was gone. Davy stayed there for a long moment, holding the red ball, his heart aching, but also full. His friend had returned to give him the gift he'd wished for. One final game, one last memory, one last playtime with Shadow.